You know me, I love a Fujifilm recipe. I love creating them, I love shooting with them, but maybe most of all, I love when someone sends me a photograph that they've taken with one of my recipes. If you're new to Fujifilm, you might be overwhelmed by all of this recipe chat. Basically, Fujifilm's built-in picture profiles are called film simulations, and in the menu of your Fujifilm camera, you can select a film simulation and adjust settings like the white balance, or the tone curve, or the sharpness, or the color, and you can even add grain to create and save a preset or look for the JPEGs that come straight out of your camera. So in this video, I'm going to take a few mundane photographs I've taken over the past week with my Fujifilm camera and show you the power that Fujifilm recipes have to spice up an average photograph. Loads of people have said to me recently that they're unsure of which film simulation or Fujifilm recipe to use in their own photography. Hopefully this video will give you a bit of a clearer understanding of my thinking process when it comes to using Fujifilm recipes, which recipes to use and when to use them. What I'm going to do first is show each photograph with my Fujifilm recipe 2020. 2020 was designed like 2020 vision, to replicate what my eye saw of the scene before I took the photograph. So expect to see a really neutral, a very clean and unstylized base. And then after that, we can try a couple of more interesting recipes on top. Okay, so here we go. This is image number 1, and it's a jumper hanging on a fence. The first thing I see when I look at this image is the colors pink and green. So to me, pink and green is Fujicolor film stock. Whenever I see blue and orange or blue and yellow, I think Kodak. Whenever I see pink and green, I think Fujicolor. So the film simulation inside my Fujifilm camera that closest matches Fujicolor film stocks, for me anyway, is Classic Negative. So one of my recipes with Classic Negative at its base, which I think we should try first, is called Canned Heat. It's a fairly new recipe, so let's chuck that on and see what it looks like. Canned Heat's looking pretty good on that. I like the Classic Negative film simulation, it definitely works, but I think what it needs is a little bit more contrast and maybe a push into the warmer side. So a recipe of mine that comes to mind that we could now try on this image is Negs on Toast. It's a bit of a weird name, but I called it Negs on Toast because it's Classic Negative and it has a really warm, rich brown, like warm tone about it. And let's throw that on and you'll see what it looks like. Yeah, I think Negs on Toast for this image is really, really working. Whatever way, the white balance when I shot this image made the photograph look a lot bluer, so we needed something to really warm it up, and Negs on Toast looks great on this photograph. So on to the next one. So this is just your standard photograph of daisies in a garden, and I actually think it looks quite good with 2020. It's a really neutral recipe, 2020, but let's just give it a bit more style, and maybe we could try Nurture Nature, my Provia-based recipe designed to make nature sing. Yeah, I really like what Nurture Nature's doing here. It's kind of making the greens a bit deeper, more like emerald green. Maybe we could go a different way with it and try something a bit more like dreamy and hazy. Maybe like a Classic Negative recipe with minus clarity would look really cool. So let's try, let's stick Rust Rumor on there and see what Rust Rumor looks like. What do you think? I think Rust Rumor actually looks pretty cool on this image. It's given it like a filmy look, and the highlights are kind of blooming with that minus clarity. So that works really well. Let's look at the next one. So just another standard photograph, this time of cherry blossoms I took when I was out and about. I think this one here definitely needs like warmed up. So let's try Canned Heat on this one and see what it does. I don't love what it's doing to the sky. Maybe we could use like a chrome recipe to make that sky go a bit more like teal and see what it does. Maybe let's try the first recipe I ever created, soft chrome. Soft chrome's looking okay. The sky and the branches are kind of blending into each other, which doesn't look very nice. So I think we need something with a bit more punch and a bit more saturation overall to pull those colors away from each other. So let's try one of my new Astia recipes called Sunny Jim and see what that looks like. Sunny Jim was a recipe made for bright sunny days, shooting like nature, like flowers, and captures nature really, really well and captures that sun and adds a lot of saturation to the image. And I think it looks really good with this cherry blossom photo. So this image here of the fence in the foreground and the bridge going around in the background, I really like all the lines. So I think when I took this photograph, I imagined it in black and white. Let's throw on XP2 Electro, let's go for that. I designed XP2 Electro after shooting with Ilford's XP2 Super 400 film stock to, replicate the look of that film stock. So let's try it on this image and see what it looks like. Okay, XP2 Electro's looking all right. It's maybe a little bit too bright. I think what it needs is a recipe that'll really crush the shadows and just leave the whites, so something with a bit less dynamic range. Let's try my most recent black and white recipe with acros and a green filter at its base. It's called Salted Slate. Let's chuck that on and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think Salted Slate really works for this image. It brings down the shadows and the blacks and just leaves the whites as the focus. So this is the perfect recipe for this image. On to the next one. So this is the same fence as before, but rather than making it black and white like the last one, let's try and leave the color in. I think it looks pretty good with 2020, the recipe. Maybe we could exaggerate the contrast and add a bit more warmth to it. So let's throw Sunny Jim, that new Astia recipe on and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that looks really great. Let's leave that one there and go to the next photograph. I quite like this image. It looks good with 2020, I think, but maybe it could do with a bit more shadows around the bushes just to draw the viewer's eye more to the airplane in the center. Let's throw on one of my Astia recipes, Blue Astia, which has a lot more contrast and a slightly cooler tone overall. Blue Astia is looking really good on that image, I think. Really natural and bold colors, but I'm just noticing that the flowers are yellow and the sky's blue, so maybe a classic chrome recipe would give it a bit of a more stylized look. So let's throw on my classic chrome recipe, Crisp Chrome, that has just a little bit of clarity to give it that extra punch. Crisp Chrome's a cool look too on this. I think overall I prefer Blue Astia, but both work. Let's go to the next photograph. Okay, the next image is this blue wall with some paint coming off and some handprints beside it. It's a little bit flat with 2020, so it needs a recipe to really bring it to life. So let's try Crisp Chrome that we just used on that previous image and see what it does. Okay, Crisp Chrome's looking all right, but it could really do with something that brings out those colors a little bit more. Maybe let's try one of my earliest recipes, Blue City. It's a recipe I created for shooting buildings and reflections in the city, obviously, hence the name Blue City. Let's try it on this photograph and see the look that it creates. Blue City has a +3 clarity, which adds depth, and a cool white balance, which I think really works here to bring this image to life. With this image here, this chimney shadow on the wall, I'm really seeing it working with a classic chrome recipe. So let's try Crisp Chrome on this one and see what it does. Again, I'm not really loving what Crisp Chrome's doing to this image, I don't know why. Does it have green in the shadows or something? It's just a bit like muddy, it needs something. Let's stick with classic chrome. I have another recipe called Contrast Chrome, which is very similar to Crisp Chrome, but it's slightly warmer and it has more contrast, but it has zero clarity for ease of shooting. So let's try Contrast Chrome on this and see what it looks like. Yeah, that's the one. That's working so much better for me on this image than Crisp Chrome was, so Contrast Chrome, definitely better for this one. So here we have a cushion that's been thrown out and is propped up against like a box or something. Once again, I'm seeing pinks and greens, so let's try Rust Roamer, my classic negative recipe, on this image and see what it does. It's looking a little bit flat and green and muddy, so let's keep it with classic negative, but again, let's try Negs on Toast to really give it a bit more of a punch and bring in those earthy tones and see what it does. Yeah, I think this toast toned recipe really works here and brings this image to life, so let's go to the next one. 2020 is looking great on this one, but once again I'm seeing pinks and greens, so let's pick up where we left off and chuck on Negs on Toast to see what this recipe does for this image. Oh, so yeah, here on this one I think the brown tones are really killing the image. It's just like too much for it and we're losing the saturation of the green, so let's try an Astia recipe that still has like the warm tones. Let's try Sunny Jim on this and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think Sunny Jim's really working here. The contrast and colours look perfect and the heat from the white balance shift's really warming that wall colour up, which is, you know, ties the image together, I think. So Sunny Jim was the right call for this one. I think this image here would look really good in black and white, but let's try keep it in colour for now and see if we can do something a little bit different with it. I think there's maybe a bit of like subtext there that can be read into with this image of like the camera, like the CCTV camera and the church, like the church is always watching you or something. So let's give it a bit of a darker look with Blue City. That'll add like a cool tone to the photograph. Yeah, Blue City's kind of giving this image like a dystopian feeling, which is pretty cool, but not really my style. So let's heat it back up and chuck on, let's go for a classic chrome based recipe, Contrast Chrome. I think that'll work really well, warm up this image, and the colours of the classic chrome film simulation will work really well with the sky and the brick of the church, so let's go for that. This is such a basic photograph, lamppost 99. I'm thinking a bit of clarity and chrome will work well on this image, so let's chuck on Crisp Chrome. You know what, I'm not really liking what Crisp Chrome's doing to this image. It's not Crisp Chrome's day today, but we need something that dials back the blue because everything's just like blending together. Something that keeps the contrast and maybe highlights the rust, so let's try Negs on Toast on this image and just see what it does. By dialing back the blues, your eyes are drawn to details that maybe they weren't before when you were just like bombarded with that colour. Details like the wispy clouds in the background, or like some details on the lamppost in the rust, or maybe the brown smear on that number 9. Negs on Toast, working again, that's pretty cool. This is such a non-image, this backlit bench. I would skip right past this photograph in Lightroom if it came up, or at the very least I'd make it black and white. So maybe that's what we should do here, is chuck a black and white recipe on and see what it looks like. Let's throw on Black Slap, which is one of the very first recipes, black and white recipes I ever created. Yeah, Black Slap's working alright here. It's one of those recipes where you can shoot anything and it looks interesting because it's this like dark, moody black and white recipe, but I wonder if we chucked on Negs on Toast on this image, whether it would save it like it did Lamppost 99. Let's throw on Negs on Toast and see. I think it actually looks really good with Negs on Toast. It's such an average photograph, but Negs on Toast has really brought those like rich brown tones and saved the photograph. That's funny. Here's a photo of a chimney. I'm tempted just to chuck on Negs on Toast. Maybe this whole video will just be a Negs on Toast appreciation video. let's throw on eggs on toast and see. Yeah, that's funny, it's working here too, but let's dial this one back and keep it warm, but bring back a bit of the saturation. Let's go Sunny Jim, my warm Astia recipe. I think I prefer Sunny Jim on this image. That's a nicer look. It's more natural, a bit less stylized. And you know what? Eggs on toast's had enough praise. This photograph here is the type of image that looks good no matter what colors or what recipe it's shot with or how it's edited or whatever. Let's chuck on eggs on toast for the crack and see what it does. Once again, eggs on toast's working here, but I think because it's like the rides, the funfair rides, it could do with something a bit more nostalgic, so something a bit more, dare I say, film-like. Let's try canned heat on this one and see what it does. Yeah, canned heat has worked here. It's a bit more, I'm trying not to say vintage looking, but yeah, you know what I mean. It's a bit dirtier and a bit more nostalgic maybe. So here's a photograph of some bumper cars at the same amusement place as the last image. I think something a bit hazy, you know, to give that nostalgic vibe again, could work. Let's try Rust Roamer in this image and see what it's doing. Maybe something with even more haze would work here, you know, to give an even more nostalgic feel. I have a series of recipes, like a trio of recipes called the Fuji Pop Trio, and they all have -5 clarity, I think, if I remember correctly. So let's try Fuji Pop Trio number 2, which is classic chrome. It has a classic chrome base, but -5 clarity. Let's try that. Yeah, I'm not really loving that one. I like the haziness of it, but the colors are quite distracting, especially that green hedge, you know, behind the bumper cars. Let's just make it black and white and chuck on black slap and see what it does. Yeah, you know what, that is so much better in my eyes. Like, rather than being distracted by the colors, you make the image black and white and suddenly you can see like the shapes and the lines and the numbers and the reflections and the words on the signs. So black and white's definitely a good shout for this one. So that was black slap. This next image is another one with strong lines, but I think it needs to remain in color. So let's heat it up with canned heat and see what that does. That's working really well, but I think as this image was taken around dusk, we could do something really cool with this one. So I have a recipe like an early recipe that I designed specifically for sunsets and sunrises called Peach Fade, and it just emphasizes that like pinky, peachy glow that you get with like sunrises and sunsets. So let's try Peach Fade. That's really cool, really like dreamy and really warm. So let's go to the next one. So here we have a bird in the reflection of some glass. I think it's like a car showroom or something. And there's like a pinkness to the sky here that I want to get rid of. So let's try Blue City to try and cool the photograph down. Blue City was designed for shooting windows and buildings and reflections, so it makes sense that it works on this image. The only thing I'm noticing is that you kind of lose a bit of the warmth, which gives you context for what time of day this photograph was shot at. So let's maybe try a classic chrome-based recipe, maybe one with a bit of clarity. Let's try crisp chrome on this one and see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that's gorgeous. You've still got the contrast and the sky is going a bit teal because of the classic chrome film simulation, and you've got the warmth giving you that, like, you know, the feeling of what time of day it is. So I think crisp chrome works really well here. So this image is like bunting blowing in the wind or whatever. We were on like a little train ride with our daughter, and I just saw the bunting flapping in the wind and rain, so I took a photograph of it. And maybe this image with all the colours in it is a good one to try out my Velvia recipe called Sherbet Lemon. Let's try that and see what it looks like. Because Sherbet Lemon has Velvia at its base, it's making the colours absolutely explode, but maybe a bit too much. You know, the greens in the background are like way too saturated, so let's try go completely the other way and throw Rust Rumour on there and see what it does. You know, a classic negative recipe. You know what, Rust Rumour on this image is much more calm and more muted and possibly quite filmic as well, so let's leave that one there. On to the next. I got this atmospheric shot by holding my camera over a hedge. I think it looks good with 2020, but maybe it just needs like warmed up a little bit. So let's try Sunny Jim, that warm Astia recipe. No, I don't think that's working. I think it's lost a sense of like mystery. So maybe we need less warmth and less saturation. Let's go the other way and go with Rust Rumour in this and see what it looks like. Whoa, yeah, it's kind of unexpected, but I think that's working really well. It's given it like a sort of creepy, eerie, mysterious vibe to the image, which I think works well with it being like telephone wires in the mist sort of thing. So Rust Rumour was a good shout there. I like this shot, but for me, the distraction is the yellow of like the grass and the moss. So let's try and kill that yellow color with a classic negative recipe. Let's chuck Rust Rumour on there and see what it does. No, I don't think that's worked for this image. It's too strong a look, so let's change it up. Let's go classic chrome. Let's put contrast chrome on to bring the colors back to normal, but to make those yellows go a bit more orange. Contrast chrome is nice on this image, but I think it's still a bit too warm, so let's try and bring the white balance back to the cooler side and desaturate the colors a bit. Let's chuck on Blue Astia and see what that does. I think Blue Astia works perfectly for this image, just the right amount of contrast and saturation, so let's go on to the next one. One of my go-tos for shooting people is classic chrome, so let's try my classic chrome based recipe, crisp chrome, on this and see what it does. I think crisp chrome works here, but it's given a bit too much clarity and a bit too much contrast maybe. So let's go for the first Fujifilm recipe I ever created, soft chrome, which is crisp chrome dialed back, or crisp chrome is soft chrome dialed up. So let's try soft chrome and see what it looks like. That's the one. Soft chrome works really well here. It softens Ruth's skin and, you know, brings a bit more detail into the shadow, so that's perfect for this image. Another person, this is my best mate Robbie waiting for a train, and I noticed the yellows and blues here, so I think soft chrome will work again perfectly on this image. Let's try it. Yeah, I think soft chrome's working once again really well here, but let's try go a different way and go for my recipe Nurture Nature, which is Provia based recipe, perfect for like natural colors. Here's me in the mirror of a charity shop window. I'm thinking for this one we go black and white, so let's chuck on my black and white recipe, XP2 Electro. I forgot the name there. No, I'm not really feeling that, you know. I'm missing the color, like it just kind of, you lose something making that one black and white. So let's go for crisp chrome, one of my favorite recipes. It hasn't had a good rap in this video, but I still believe in it. Okay, yeah, crisp chrome's working here really well. That, like, the orange tones and the blue tones, just like gorgeous. This is such an average photograph, but let's see what it needs. Maybe it's time to get an eggs on toast out again and whip out the brown tones. Yeah, that's cool, but it's kind of muddy. Let's try contrast chrome and see what that does. Yeah, you see how contrast chrome just like cuts through that mud there. That's working really well, and lets the leaves, the color of the brown leaves, be the star of the show here. For this photograph of moss, I don't want to destroy all those green tones, so let's use an Astia recipe. Let's go for Blue Astia and see. That's looking good, but maybe we could turn up the heat a little bit and bring out those like red stems and brown brown leaves in the background. Let's go for Sunny Jim, that warmer Astia recipe of mine. Oh, spicy, yeah, I really like that. The heat, you know, you can almost feel the sun bouncing off the moss there. Okay, another fence shot. This one has to be black and white again, so let's chuck on XP2 Electro and see what it does. That's looking cool, but I think, yeah, once again, it needs like brought down, so a bit more contrast and a bit less dynamic range. So let's chuck on Salted Slate and see the results. Okay, so this is our final image, and when I took this one, I imagined it in black and white, so let's chuck on Salted Slate. Yeah, that's really cool, although it does lose a bit of the context in black and white, so let's bring the color back in and heat it up a bit. Maybe let's chuck on Sunny Jim again and see what it does. Yeah, I'm not so sure. I think I preferred it in black and white, but let's take it to 11 and wheel out Negs on Toast one last time to see what it does to this final image. Yeah, that's actually really cool. I really like that. It's now reminding me, like the tree trunks reminded me of like elephant skin or something. It's nice. Negs on Toast saving the day once again. What do you think? So there you go. Hopefully that's given you a bit of an insight of my thought process when it comes to choosing what Fujifilm recipes to use and when to use them. Like, if I know I'm going to be taking photographs of people that day, I'll make sure and have soft chrome, maybe crisp chrome, and Nurture Nature loaded into my X-T4. Or if I'm going for a walk in a forest or up a mountain, I'll make sure and have an Astia recipe loaded up. Other recipes like Salted Slate, they just like basically live on my camera the whole time, so they're ready to shoot with whenever I need them. So yeah, once again, all of the recipes featured in this video and all the recipes I've ever created can be found on my website. It's rossandhisjpegs.com. You can head over there and check out the recipes, try them out for yourself, tweak them, change them, steal them, create your own recipes based off of them, or whatever you want to do. Basically just be yourself and have fun, because that's what photography is all about at the end of the day. If you have a favourite Fujifilm recipe, I would love to read about it in the comments below, so get typing and drop me a comment and tell me your favourite Fujifilm recipe to shoot with. Anyways, wherever you are in the world, I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in another video very soon. See ya!